Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. As somebody like rides a motorcycle by, today's been one of those days. And this one came in quietly and confidentially from a friend of our firm. And we've got an expert who can help us answer. And Jaime-Alexis just jumped in on Twitter when we started talking about this. And so for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And we're here with Jaime-Alexis Fowler, who is the founder and executive director or CEO? I never know with nonprofits.
Oh, it's fine. Executive director is fine.
Executive director of Empower Work, which is an organization that offers a text line where people who are having some kind of crisis at work can text it. And so the question, which is one I feel like so many of us are dealing with right now, not me on my team, but just in general, is if an employee is going through some hardship, genuine hardship, and in the case of this person who wrote in, they were talking about things like family illness, that kind of thing, and plenty of others we can come up with. What's the right way to have an expectation of results from them while also supporting them as a human being? And would love any and all perspective.
Yeah, this is something that we see a lot at Empower Work, because as you can imagine, folks who are texting in are dealing with a lot, particularly in the past 2 years. And, I think, as we all know, people are struggling. And so how do you move everything forward while also acknowledging the hardship that's going on? And for us, I think for me personally, as a leader, this is something that I've struggled with many moons ago when I was at a different organization. I was really transparent with my team, because there was a time when almost everyone on the team, and this was, pre-COVID, everyone on the team was going through something. People had family crisis. They had some mental illness for themselves that they were dealing with. There were all kinds of personal complexities on our team. And I basically created space for each person on the team and said, look, we're all human. We all have things that are going on, and we have these big goals that we have to hit. And we also have to acknowledge the humanness while we're trying to hit them. And we created a space as a team on our team where we could tap in and tap out as needed. And so there was this real comfort, not with disclosing all of the personal details. People weren't, diving into everything that was going on with them, but there was enough trust where people could say, you know what, I'm not 100% today. And I really would like, Roy, hey, you to jump in if you can help me out with X, Y, and Z today. And it created this sense of balance on the team. And I learned a lot from that, and have tried to pull that in to the current tsunami plus hurricane plus earthquake.
Let me make it more challenging, because it is a tsunami plus earthquake. Because I think what I hear you saying is, what a therapist that I work with called publishing the dilemma, that you're basically sharing with everybody on the team, like, look, here's what I see happening, and you're creating space for them to be human beings. What if there's a person on your team who is struggling with whatever's going on personally to the degree where they're just not performing over a long period of time, months or something like that, up to the bar required for the organization? What do you do?
Yeah, I think in that case, in my mind, there are kind of two situations. There's a situation where you've created that trust and mutual disclosure, and you've gotten to that point.
Let's assume, by the way, that that's the situation. I know I'd like to do the other situation too, but I'm trying to do the version with a good manager who's been humane, as opposed to somebody who's like struggling silently with alcoholism and then no shows at work for 3 weeks, and you're like, WTF?
Yeah. So I think in that first case where you've established trust, you've had active conversations. I think, for those who are fans of Brene Brown, there's like the clearest kind.
And who's not?
The clearest kind mantra. I do think there's clarity in saying to the person, as well as care, to say, look, we've talked about this. Here's what I'm seeing to date. We've gone through these conversations, and I've noticed that you are still struggling and we're not able to meet these expectations. So I want to talk with you about a path forward from here, and really laying out a series of possibilities depending on, what's needed for you, what's needed for the organization, what's needed for the team, and what's needed for the other person. And I think when I chimed in on Twitter, when you're asking this question, and I saw that quote from Adam Grant that was like, oh, the person always comes first. And I was like, Well, the person always comes first, but also you have your team, you have yourself, you have your deliverables. And honestly, like, what person feels good knowing that their personal challenge or what they're going through is making things worse in the place of work? Like, that's actually going to make them feel worse too. And so I think being really transparent with, this is what I'm noticing, this is what I'm seeing, and there are a couple of paths that may be available. Let's say it's a medical thing. Maybe it's they take a medical leave, and you plot out a course for medical leave, a replacement. But there could also be an exit path scenario too, and say, look, I care about you. I fully support you. I know what you're going through is so hard, and I have to be clear that this isn't meeting my expectations. And that's really hard to do, but that is in some ways the kindest path.
Yeah, I think that there's the it's sort of the irreconcilable differences moment where sometimes caring for somebody's personal needs and satisfying the performance needs of the organization and the morale needs of others on the team, those two may be in conflict. And there's so many factors, like how long has the person worked on the team? It's one thing if the person just joined 2 days ago, and another thing if you have a decade of trust with the person. And the one other factor I just want to layer in is what the culture of that organization is, because you get to these situations and they're fortunately, I think, rare enough that even in a large organization, they don't come up all the time. And that means you can appeal to some broader organizational values, because there's a conflict here. I really hear what here is a conflict between right versus right, which is care for a human being versus performance. Those are two good things, and sometimes they're in conflict with one another, and different organizations have different ways of doing it. I mean, in some places it's like, sorry, we just have no tolerance. Like, if you're not well enough to come into work and you've used up all your sick days, bye. And I'm not saying that that's the way I want to run an organization, but it is the way some organizations run. And in other organizations, when something like that happens, there's a sabbatical program, or there's some other structured way of doing it. And so with the consent of the person involved, what I really often believe in is just trying to find some way to escalate it and share the dilemma with others in the organization. If you are running yourself a smaller organization, well, then that I think then it's up to you to decide, which is, I've seen people do things like pay for 6 months off for the person because it was just that worth it for them. And then you're thinking about issues like, what precedent am I creating, and all kinds of policy level stuff.
Right.
But,
it is equitable and
sort of, past scope on this. But I love the clear as kind reinforcement and the notion that you're basically talking about a path of steps you're taking that are building trust and mutual disclosure, first with the person, and then, if possible, with the team as a whole. Obviously, there can be cases where it's like somebody's going through a divorce. They may not want to tell the team they're going through something. I had a moment once where I had something going on. I don't even remember what it was, maybe, I don't know, years ago. And I remember saying to my head of HR, I was a CEO, I was like, look, I'm going to be distracted for a while. I can't tell you why, and it's nothing that's going to affect the business other than my availability to be here, but I'm going to be distracted. And I'd appreciate if you just let me know if there are issues that come up from that. And so that felt like a right level of disclosure. But
well, and I think I think that's a great example of like setting a precedent, that if you have a culture where there is some degree of mutual disclosure and trust, you can have all of those conversations much more readily. And when that's already established, you're able to talk more clearly about paths forward and alternatives. And at least what I've seen in my experience when folks have been going through really extraordinarily difficult things. And I mean, folks dealing with this right now who I've been talking to who are like, I'm really struggling with my mental health. I'm really struggling with, just litany of personal things that are coming at me. And they don't always necessarily have to share the details, but having exactly as you said, like, I'm going to be distracted, or I know this thing's coming up, creates a space that's really, really important. And I think, to your question of like, hey, what are the precedents that get set, or what does this look like? In my view, anytime that mutual disclosure is happening and that trust is happening, and you're able to show up for someone, you are going to have a deeper, more engaged team member once they're on the other side. And it depends what the context is, because it could be a situation where, hey, I know it's time bound and it's going to be done in a month, and I've got this window that it's going to be an issue, or it could not be time bound because it could be a really messy divorce and you don't know what the timeline is, whatnot. But I think when you're able to have those conversations, you can at least acknowledge what the factors are to some extent and game plan together. And the outcome is usually probably going to be more positive for your deliverables once you do that.
I love that. That's, what I hear you saying there is that in how you handle it, you could have a positive spillover on the rest of the team just by role model. Hey, like this is an organization that cares for somebody when they're in trouble and still takes care of the rest of us. Any other parting thoughts before we wrap?
I was just going to say, usually we see the opposite at Empower Work, so I'm glad you went with a more positive example,
Yeah.
which I appreciate. But I think the key piece is holding that balance between, as you were saying, the right and the right. Like it is right to hold the human front and center, and it's also right and makes sense to hold yourself, the team, and what you need to achieve as a company too.
Yeah, no right answers on those. All right. Well, if folks want to see other questions answered, you can go to thisisnotadvice.org where you'll see all the past questions, and this one will be there too. I'll make sure to share it with our firm's friend. And Jaime-Alexis, thank you both for joining us and for the work that you do. And if folks are encountering a crisis at work and they want to text Empower Work, how do they figure out how to do that?
Yeah, so they can go to empowerwork.org or text in 510-674-1414.
Okay, I'm just going to put up empowerwork.org for folks so that they can see it there.
And you can share it with your employees too, because one of the nice things is if you're challenged with having this conversation with someone on your team, or you want to provide an outside resource, you can share Empower Work too.
Awesome. I love it. All right. Thank you. And to be continued. And please come back whenever you want to volunteer. You are invited. So please do.